Hello YouTube. Today we're going to talk about blackmail. In particular, I'm going to outline the paradox of blackmail. So let's start with a classic case of blackmail. Suppose that there's a journalist investigating a very conservative religious politician, and the journalist takes photographs of the politician having a series of sordid affairs. If this information were released to the public, it would probably destroy the politician's marriage and end his political career. But the journalist makes him an offer. Pay me a large sum of money and I'll destroy the photographs. The journalist is trying to procure money from the politician by threatening to perform an action that would make the politician much worse off. This is blackmail, and this is illegal in most countries. But the criminalization of blackmail is somewhat puzzling, because each case of blackmail seems to decompose into entirely lawful acts. So take the case of the threat against the politician. First of all, it's not illegal to release photographs showing the politician's affair. It's not illegal to release information that will be extremely damaging to the politician. It's not illegal to do this with the intention of making money. After all, most journalists expect to make money through their work in one way or another. Moreover, it's not illegal to issue an unconditional threat to release the photographs. It would actually be standard journalistic practice to contact the politician ahead of time, tell him what you're planning to do, perhaps request his side of the story. So, it's perfectly fine to make the threat to release the photographs. Where you have the legal right to perform a given action, you have the right to threaten to perform that action. And finally, it's not illegal to request money from the politician. It's fine. It's fine to unconditionally threaten to release the photos. It's fine to request money from a person. Yet if the journalist threatens to release the photos unless the politician gives him money, this is blackmail, right? The conditional threat to release the photos unless money is provided, that is illegal. So why? Why is this? Why should this be illegal when the components of it are perfectly legitimate? Now, first of all, it's worth drawing a distinction here between blackmail and extortion. This distinction isn't always clearly drawn within legal systems, but in the philosophical debate about blackmail, the distinction is this. In blackmail, you threaten to perform an otherwise legal act that would bring about negative consequences for another person unless that person provides some benefit for you. The threat to release compromising photographs unless payment is provided, that's blackmail because releasing the photographs would be legal if there was no demand for money. In extortion, by contrast, you threaten to perform an otherwise illegal act that would bring about negative consequences for another person, unless that person provides some benefit for you. For instance, if I threaten to destroy your property unless you pay me, I'm threatening to do something unlawful there. And there's no paradox in accounting for what's problematic about extortion, right? Why should extortion be legal? Well, of course, threatening to perform unlawful acts, that's generally illegal. So yeah, I mean, the issue is this, right? It's not illegal to threaten to do something that you're legally permitted to do. It's not illegal to request money, yet the combination of these acts is illegal. That's the basic paradox, right? I will do X unless you do Y. That's illegal, even though doing X is legal and doing Y is legal. So, I mean, another way we can kind of bring out what's puzzling here is to look at it from the point of view of the blackmailee, the victim of blackmail. So a journalist uncovers photographs of the politician's affair. In the first case, let's say the journalist makes an unconditional threat, right? They say, look, I'm going to release these photographs. Well, that's perfectly legal. In the second case, blackmail, the journalist makes a conditional threat. I will release the photographs unless you give me money. That's illegal. But now if you were in the politician's position, which would you prefer? I mean, what would you want? Wouldn't you prefer the second case with the conditional threat? I mean, surely you're better off with the conditional threat than the unconditional threat. When the conditional threat is issued, you have more options. I mean, there's a sense in which, blackmail is a kind of victimless crime. The victim of blackmail is actually put in a better position than they otherwise would be by the offer of money in exchange for concealing the information. And if the blackmailee takes the deal, then it seems that she's in a sense the beneficiary of the blackmailer. She prefers the information to be kept in the hands of the blackmailer alone, and the blackmailer is charging a fee for that. Again, keep in mind here that, so the point here is not simply that the blackmailer offers the blackmailee a choice. The victim of extortion is also presented with a choice, right? Give me your money or I'll destroy your property. Give me your money or I'll beat you up. But the point is that both of the options presented by the blackmailer are legal, right? Like if this is a journalist, right, maybe the journalist is going to make their money. They're going to earn money by just releasing these photos. But the journalist thinks, you know what? Instead, I'll give you an option. I'll give you an option. You give me the money instead, and I'll keep the photos secret. Wouldn't you prefer to have that option? Some of the writers on this subject talk of a second paradox of blackmail. And I don't think this really is a second paradox. I think this is really just another way of bringing out what's puzzling about the criminalization of blackmail. So, why is bribery legal while blackmail is not? So, suppose that instead the case is this, the journalist is investigating the politician, takes these photos, and then the politician discovers that the journalist has these compromising photos. Then the politician contacts the journalist and offers to pay him in exchange for destroying the photos. It would not be illegal for the politician to make that offer. It wouldn't be illegal for the journalist to accept it, at least assuming that the photographs don't depict anything illegal, right? Like they're photos of an affair, not photos of the politician committing a crime. There's no destruction of evidence or whatever going on here. So the point is that it's not illegal to accept money in exchange for concealing information, provided you don't initiate this deal. So the legality of an act of selling secrecy depends on who initiates it. That's a bit strange. Why is that? Why is that the case? Richard Epstein, in his article Blackmail Inc., notes the structural similarity between blackmail and hard bargaining. And again, this is just another way, I think, of bringing out this paradox. Suppose there is a seller of widgets negotiating with a buyer. The seller threatens to withhold the goods unless the buyer pays a higher price. That looks kind of similar to blackmail, right? Give me money or I'll stop providing you with this product. Similarly, the buyer may bargain with the seller. The buyer may threaten to stop purchasing the goods unless the seller offers a lower price. Now, nobody thinks that hard bargaining in commercial contexts should be illegal. And this is the case whether we're dealing with supermarket chains or plumbers or street vendors or whatever else. And there's lots of other cases that are kind of similar to this. So, let's take, for instance, a labour union that threatens a strike in order to secure a better pension deal for its members, right? Like, if you do not accept this deal, we will withhold our labour. Or a protest group that threatens a boycott in order to persuade a company to change its practices. Like, if you do not stop supporting this political candidate, we will protest outside your stores. We will stop buying your goods. So, it turns out, actually, that contrary to our initial statement of the paradox, that threatening to do something you are legally permitted to do in order to acquire a benefit from a person is blackmail, right? Well, actually, threatening to do something that you're legally permitted to do in order to acquire a benefit from a person, that's perfectly legal in many circumstances. That's not even counted as blackmail in many circumstances. So, it's going to be a matter of like the specific kind of threat that's being made, right? But of course, this only makes the paradox of blackmail sharper, right? What is the relevant difference between hard bargaining and blackmail, right? There's all of these kinds of threats that are perfectly acceptable. What's the relevant difference between that and blackmail? Okay, so I'm talking to you now, the audience. If you do not give me some cash, if you do not sign up to my Patreon and give me money and get access to a bunch of bonus videos, then I'm just going to delete this channel, okay? That's what's going to happen. You got to give me money or I'm just going to delete it. And you should believe me, because I used to have a Discord and I just deleted that. So, haha, you thought I deleted the Discord for no reason. You thought I deleted it for fun. But no, there was a reason. I'm showing you that I'm serious. That's why I deleted it. I want you to know that I'm serious. This channel, it's just going to get blown up if you don't give me money, okay? That's what's going to happen. You better pay up. You better pay up, suckers. Right, anyway, let's move on. So let's think about some possible solutions to this paradox. So Epstein takes a consequentialist approach here, right? Instead of focusing on the relation between the blackmailer and the blackmailee in a specific case, we should ask, what would the world look like if blackmail were legalized to the extent that seems to be required by a general moral theory? That's Epstein's question. What would the world look like if blackmail were legalized? What would be the consequences? Well, first of all, there would be an open market for exploiting the potential gains of blackmail. Suppose that there's a company, Blackmail Inc. This company specializes in finding incriminating information about people, ensuring that the information is otherwise concealed, and then issuing blackmail threats, right? Pay the company and they'll keep the information concealed. We can expect that in a world with legalized blackmail, a company like this would emerge. Now, would this be a good thing? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that if a person can be blackmailed, this is only because they have incriminating information that they want to keep secret. Any victim of blackmail, any blackmailee, must be engaging in long-term deceit. Maybe it's a man having an affair, cheating on his wife, right? In doing so, he's deceiving his wife. Maybe it's a politician, right, who argues in favor of drug prohibition, but who takes drugs in his personal life. In keeping this secret, he's deceiving his constituents. Now, deceit like this is not a good thing, right? If you're in a relationship with somebody, or if you vote for a politician, or if you use the services of a company, or whatever else, generally it would be better for you to have all the relevant information. So companies like Blackmail Inc. are essentially becoming accessories to this kind of long-term deceit, and they're encouraging it to continue. And this is not a good thing. This isn't the sort of, we don't want to live in a world, we shouldn't want to live in a world where this kind of long-term deceit is going on. So it's legitimate to enact laws to discourage this. Worse, these companies may end up encouraging more serious forms of fraud and criminal behavior. One reason for this is just, well, how exactly is the blackmailee going to pay off the blackmail companies? The blackmailee is unlikely to have access to some of the usual sources of funds, right? I mean, they're not going to be able to turn to family, friends, or bank loans to help them out, because these sources would want to know the purpose of the loan, and no blackmailee is going to want to reveal that they are paying off the blackmail company. Any victim of blackmail is already going to be engaging in long-term deceit. They're already doing something that they recognize would be seriously damaging to their life and reputation. So it's not really a much greater step to start pursuing genuinely criminal activities in order to pay off the blackmailers. So this is one reason, right? It's like, in raising the funds to pay off the blackmailers, it's likely that people would turn to crime. So Epstein says. The second thing is that the Blackmail Inc. will need to ensure that any blackmail information does not become publicly known by other mechanisms. So they're going to need to help the blackmailee actively suppress the information. Now, of course, in some cases, this might be of relatively little public interest. But again, think about public figures like politicians. It is often in the public interest to know what these people are doing. And companies like Blackmail Inc. are going to facilitate the suppression of relevant information. They're essentially participating in perpetrating a fraud on those who have a legitimate interest in knowing such information. So Epstein concludes that the difference between blackmail and similar activities is only that only blackmail breeds fraud and deceit. Right? So if we legalize blackmail, we should expect an increase in fraud and deceit. And, well, that's not something we want. Okay, so a couple of objections to Epstein's account here. First of all, there are many legitimate activities, perfectly legal activities, that also are going to encourage criminal behavior in the kind of way that Epstein expects of blackmail. So let's say that somebody loses their job, or, somebody's rent is significantly increased. So they're not able to keep up with their rent payments, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing that might push somebody to turn to crime. Or think about things like aggressive marketing campaigns of expensive items to, low-income communities. That the pursuit of status symbols like cars or jewelry, that can be enough incentive for some people to commit crimes. That can be an incentive for anybody. Whatever, wherever they are in the socioeconomic, whatever their socioeconomic class, right? There's no particular reason to expect that blackmail would encourage crime to any greater degree than these other sorts of factors. There's all sorts of things, I suppose the point is there's all sorts of, pressures, all sorts of factors that can kind of push people in the direction of crime, many of which are perfectly legal. A second worry about Epstein's argument is that it seems to presuppose that the blackmailee is engaging in wrongful deceit, right? Like, part of the reason we should criminalize blackmail is because otherwise there's going to be an incentive for people to become accessories to this kind of wrongful deceit. But it's not clear that this is the right way to think about it. I mean, obviously the blackmailee is engaging in deceit, right? And blackmail is going to hinge on concealing information. But there are plenty of contexts in which it's perfectly acceptable to conceal information or to assist somebody in concealing information. Suppose there's a person who is a closet homosexual who works in a very homophobic environment. Doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with him concealing his sexuality, nor with other people becoming accessories to that concealment. Moreover, even when we consider clear cases of wrongful deceit, like let's say that there's a man cheating on his wife, a lot of people, most people are going to say, yep, that's clearly wrong. Well, we don't usually take it to be the job of the government to discourage that through criminalization. So again, let's say, okay, man is cheating on his wife and a blackmailer demands payment to keep that information secret. Well, okay, yeah, the blackmailer has become an accessory to wrongful deceit. We might well find the cheater's behavior and the blackmailer's behavior morally repugnant. But should either of them be subject to criminal punishment in virtue of the deceit? If the deceit is the problem, it seems like most of the blame really lies with the cheater, not the blackmailer, in which case it seems kind of disproportionate to punish the blackmailer but not the cheater, right? Like, if the deceit is the problem, why don't we just outlaw the cheating? Why don't we just outlaw the deceit directly? It seems there's still a question here of like, well, yeah, if we want to use criminal punishment to discourage this kind of deceit, it's a little bit strange why you would focus on the relatively rare cases where you have some third party becoming an accessory to the deceit via blackmail, rather than just targeting the deceit itself, such as the cheating, the affair, say. Okay, another answer to this paradox is that blackmail involves a kind of unproductive exchange. So legalizing blackmail would promote economic inefficiency. So recall the distinction, the comparison rather, between blackmail and hard bargains. A typical hard bargain results in a net benefit for both parties. When a seller threatens to withhold goods unless a higher payment is given, well, if this offer is accepted, this shows that each party values what the other is exchanging more than what is sacrificed. And generally, both people come away from the exchange better off than they would otherwise be without the exchange. And this exchange also yields various kinds of social benefits. So, when the seller drives a hard bargain and gets a higher price, well, they may invest their greater income in more stock, or they may use the income to expand their business or whatever else. Ultimately, the seller is only going to be able to drive this hard bargain if they are indeed the only supplier of these goods. And perhaps the hard bargain will end up encouraging other parties to start producing the same goods and to undercut the current seller. And then when there are two parties selling the same goods, they're going to compete not just on price, but on quality, and so on and so on. So you can appeal to the sort of standard arguments here for free market competition. Tough competition between different companies often yields benefits for society in a broad range of circumstances. In blackmail transactions, by contrast, there is no net social gain. The blackmailer spends time and effort discovering this incriminating information and then keeps the information suppressed. It's analogous to a company that discovers a source of rare earth metals but then prevents anybody from mining it. The blackmailer formulates a plan to release information merely in order to sell their abstention from enacting the plan. Money is transferred from the blackmailee to the blackmailer, but other than that, nothing changes. Robert Nozick proposes two conditions for unproductive exchange. So first, in an unproductive exchange, Nozick says, the purchaser is not made better off than she would be without the transaction. Second, an unproductive exchange merely gives the purchaser relief from something that would not threaten if not for the possibility of an exchange to get relief from it. So again, compare a hard bargain. In a hard bargain, where the seller demands a higher payment, the buyer is still better off for the seller having existed. I mean, after all, the buyer wants what the seller is selling. All right? In the end, I mean, yeah, the buyer might not be happy about having to pay a higher fee or whatever, but they're still going to be better off for having the seller there. In blackmail, by contrast, the blackmailee, the buyer, would be better off if the blackmailer never existed. The blackmailee is basically just losing money to the blackmailer. That's it. Okay, so there's a couple of objections to this account. So one worry that's been raised here is that, a standard response is just, look, blackmail exchanges actually are productive in the relevant sense. What's happening here is not just that, it's not simply that the blackmailee is just giving money to the blackmailer. There are some other important things that are happening. In particular, what's changing are property rights with respect to information. When a blackmailee purchases a blackmailer's silence, the blackmailee now has more control over the information than they did previously. And in some cases, this can be very valuable. Russell Christopher, in his article Meta-blackmail, gives the following example. Suppose that a married couple are divorcing, and the wife hires a private detective who unearths damaging information about the husband, information that could cost the husband millions of dollars in the divorce settlement were it to be revealed to the wife. The private detective then offers the husband that, look, if you pay me double the fee that I would have received from the wife, I will conceal the information. I mean, it seems like the husband is made much better off by that offer. So yeah, the husband is better off for having the for that blackmail exchange having been made. But I think a deeper worry about this kind of unproductive exchange response is that it's not really clear why it matters if blackmail is an unproductive exchange. I mean, of course, we want to promote economic efficiency. We want a flourishing economy, yes, but a flourishing economy is only one among many things that matter to us. There are all sorts of things people do that have nothing to do with economic efficiency. We want, in addition, we want the freedom to direct our own lives, to make our own choices, even when those choices seem unproductive to others. Recall the company that discovers these rare earth metals and then prevents the exploitation of the resource. Well, that's maybe a bit frustrating, but it's not illegal. Suppose there's just some very wealthy person who simply enjoys sitting on a valuable resource for some reason, known only to themselves. They just enjoy the idea of not letting it be exploited. It's just their own little thing that nobody else has. That's not illegal. So if that's not illegal, why should blackmail be illegal? Certainly it's hard to imagine that the legalization of blackmail would have a significant impact on the economy, right? Even if blackmail is an unproductive exchange, it doesn't. The actual economic impact overall is going to be barely detectable. So we might worry that this doesn't really offer that much of a justification for criminalizing blackmail. A general worry about any of these sorts of answers to the blackmail paradox is that they identify the harm of blackmail in the wrong place. Intuitively, we think that blackmail involves a specific victim. The person who is blackmailed, the blackmailee, is victimized by the blackmail. And it's in virtue of this victimization that blackmail is wrong. Blackmail would be wrong regardless of whether it causes harms or whether it's social harms or whether it's economically unproductive or whatever. So from from that point of view, these sorts of consequentialist justifications for criminalizing blackmail are not really solutions to the paradox at all. They don't really get to the heart of what the problem is. So as we've seen, the paradox here is supposed to arise because the components of blackmail are perfectly legitimate. An unconditional threat to release damaging information is legitimate, and a request for money is legitimate. So we have these components which are perfectly lawful, but then we have, if you combine them, well, now it becomes unlawful. But is that really surprising? So what we're saying is X is legitimate and Y is legitimate. Well, to infer that the combination of X and Y is legitimate would be an obvious fallacy of composition. It would be like inferring that, well, since this piece of cardboard is triangular and this piece of cardboard is triangular, the two pieces attached together are triangular, right? Obviously false. Or to use a legal example, right? It is legal to be drunk. It is legal to drive a car, but it's not legal to drive a car while drunk. And there's no paradox in this. There's no paradox in outlawing drunk driving. So what we can similarly say is, look, the wrongness of blackmail emerges from the combination of the components. It's not surprising at all that if you just take one of the components, it's perfectly fine. But yeah, I mean, when you take these things and you combine them, then it becomes a problem. But how is this supposed to work? So one proposal from Ronald Coase and George Fletcher is that blackmail creates an unacceptable relation of domination. The blackmailer places the blackmail victim in a subordinate position from which that person can then be manipulated indefinitely. And there's always a risk, even if you pay off the blackmailer, there's always the risk that the blackmailer can just make ever greater demands. In fact, that often ends up happening, that you pay them off once and then more is required, right? And then this can just go on indefinitely. So the blackmailee ends up in this kind of subordinated position indefinitely. Now, the blackmailer's threat may not constitute outright coercion. I suppose it depends on your theory of coercion, but still, it's in the interest of the law to prevent people from being subjugated like this. And note that this neatly explains why we draw a distinction between blackmail and bribery. When a person offers a bribe, they are initiating the exchange, they are taking control of it, they're no longer obviously in a subordinate position. Although I suppose, of course, there might be circumstances in which a person can place themselves in a subordinate position. Maybe that's the right way to frame bribery. Still, I think, most people are going to find that less objectionable than one person being manipulated into a subordinate position by another. So, maybe this is where the problem with blackmail lies. Well, one worry about this returns to this analogy to hard bargaining. So the seller demands a higher payment for certain goods. Why does that not constitute a relation of domination in the same way as blackmail? The seller is using something that the buyer wants or needs to extract more money from the buyer. And it might be that this is invaluable to the buyer. Maybe the buyer's whole business and livelihood depends on access to these goods. And of course, even if the buyer is able to pay up this time, she's going to live with the fear that the seller might change the terms again. Maybe that price is going to go up again. So, while this point about relations of domination may help us distinguish blackmail from bribery, it's not so clear how it distinguishes blackmail from hard bargains. Another concern is that the criminalization of blackmail may actually be what creates this problem, or it may exacerbate this problem. Given that blackmail is criminal, the blackmailer may make repeated demands for money. The blackmailer can put endless pressure on the victim. By contrast, if blackmail were legalized, any blackmail contract would become enforceable. So suppose that a blackmailer demands, £5,000 to conceal information. The blackmailee pays up. Then the blackmailer starts making more demands. They demand a further £5,000 to keep the information concealed. At that point, the blackmailer would be liable for breach of contract. The blackmailee has already purchased the blackmailer's silence. So, this threat of being sued would disincentivize this kind of, endless pressure, right? Of course, the blackmailee might choose not to sue, given that they don't want to reveal that they're being blackmailed. But the point is that would be a disincentive for it. And I mean, if one then thinks about especially sort of companies. You know, I mean, to take Epstein's example, companies like Blackmail Inc. Well, I mean, being a company, they would probably want to have at least the the impression of some sort of legitimacy. So, you know, they're not likely to just constantly breach contracts that they make with people. Okay, so another way to deal with this paradox of blackmail is to say, well, actually, there is no paradox. Blackmail ought to be legalized. We can resolve all of these puzzles about blackmail. We can explain why there's no consensus on what the problem with blackmail is by just saying that, yeah, we should legalize it. Russell Christopher, in his article Meta-blackmail, gives an interesting argument in favor of legalization. So Christopher begins by proposing the scenario of meta-blackmail. Meta-blackmail is a type of blackmail where the threat involves blackmail itself. So the blackmailer says to you, give me £5,000 or I will blackmail you. Maybe the blackmailer has a reputation as a very effective private investigator, right? And so she threatens you. She's like, look, give me £5,000 or I'm going to investigate. I'm going to find damaging information about you, and then I will use that damaging information to extract the money via conventional blackmail, right? So what's interesting about meta-blackmail is that the threatened act in meta-blackmail, namely blackmail itself, is illegal. So in conventional blackmail, the blackmailer threatens an otherwise legal act. For instance, you know, give me 5k or I will release the photographs. In meta-blackmail, the blackmailer threatens an illegal act. So it seems then that while there is a puzzle about the illegality of blackmail, there shouldn't be any puzzle about the illegality of meta-blackmail. Meta-blackmail is a kind of extortion, where the demand for money is coupled with the threat of an illegal act. But you could immediately see perhaps there's something a little bit puzzling going on here. So our question is meta-blackmail worse than blackmail, right? How do these compare? And Christopher argues that, you know, any view we take here is going to lead to puzzles. Okay, so let's say we claim that meta-blackmail is more serious than blackmail. The intuition underlying this judgment is that a proposal that threatens an unlawful act is more serious than a proposal that threatens a lawful act. Since meta-blackmail threatens an unlawful act, namely blackmail, meta-blackmail is of a more serious degree of criminality than conventional blackmail. And of course, this has the strange consequence that threatening to commit a crime is more serious than committing the crime. Threatening to perform an act is more serious than actually performing the act. Second, let's say we claim that meta-blackmail is equivalent to blackmail. Well, here we can appeal to the argument that meta-blackmail and conventional blackmail are functionally equivalent. They basically do the same thing. In both cases, the blackmailee is given a choice, right? Pay 5k to keep a secret concealed, or do not pay and risk disclosure. In meta-blackmail, there is the threat to threaten to disclose a secret, which is essentially the same as the threat to disclose a secret. And so this is basically the same as standard blackmail. But now, how can it be that threatening an unlawful act is equivalent to threatening a lawful act? So Christopher presents this argument. If Act X is more serious than Act Y, then a conditional threat to commit X is more serious than a conditional threat to commit Y. Committing blackmail is more serious than disclosing an incriminating secret, so a conditional threat to commit blackmail is more serious than a conditional threat to disclose an incriminating secret. So of course, committing blackmail, that's illegal, right? Whereas just disclosing if I just disclose, or indeed if I make the unconditional threat to disclose, that's totally fine. Yeah, I mean, so if I disclose the photographs, that's fine. If I blackmail somebody, if I threaten to disclose the photographs unless payment is provided, that's much more serious. That's a much more serious thing. So we should think that, you know, that the conditional threat to do this more serious thing is more serious than the conditional threat to disclose the incriminating secret. But that's just to say that meta-blackmail is more serious than blackmail, so they're not equivalent. Third, we might say that meta-blackmail is less serious than blackmail. In meta-blackmail, the harm is much more remote. This is because the blackmailer has two steps before disclosure. I mean, first, she's going to issue the conventional blackmail threat, then she's going to disclose. In conventional blackmail, the blackmailer has only one step before disclosure. She just discloses the secret when payment fails to come. Now, where the harm is more remote, we would think the level of criminality should be less serious. But again, now we have this puzzle. Threatening to commit an unlawful act becomes less serious than threatening to commit a lawful act. I mean, given that meta-blackmail is a threat to commit an unlawful act, shouldn't we think the harm would be greater? I mean, Russell's argument then is basically that, look, the criminalization of blackmail is going to be consistent with only one of these options. If we think that blackmail should be criminalized, we have to take one of these options, but each option creates serious puzzles. By contrast, the decriminalization of blackmail resolves all of the puzzles very neatly. So we saw that option one is supported by this principle that a proposal that threatens an unlawful act is more serious than a proposal that threatens a lawful act. Decriminalizing blackmail makes both meta-blackmail and blackmail the threat to commit a lawful act. So we can continue to endorse this principle without holding that meta-blackmail is worse than blackmail. Option two faces the puzzle of how threatening an unlawful act can be equivalent to threatening a lawful act. If blackmail is legalized, meta-blackmail is the threat to commit a lawful act, so there's no puzzle in treating meta-blackmail and blackmail as equivalent. Option three faces the puzzle of how threatening an unlawful act can be less serious than threatening a lawful act. Again, decriminalization solves that puzzle. So we can maintain that conditionally threatening to threaten is less serious than conditionally threatening with no conflict with other principles. The legalization of blackmail would be essentially, the point is, it would be consistent with a broader range of our intuitions. Of course, maybe we have the intuition that blackmail should be illegal. It wouldn't be consistent with that. But there's a very broad range of sort of moral principles and other intuitions about morality that if blackmail were legalized, it would become harmonious with those. Okay, well, that's that. That's the end of that video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.